Hello and welcome to the channel. If you are new here, then hi, my name is Mel. I'm a knitter and crafter living on the Orkney Islands off the north coast of Scotland. And if you are a returning viewer, then welcome back. You are very welcome and thank you. It has been a few weeks since my last podcast episode, mostly because we've been doing quite a bit of DIY renovation work over the last month, and that's why I'm recording in a different position in my crafting room today. The spare bed where I would normally sit over on this side of the room is still in pieces. It's still dismantled, so I'm sitting on a very creaky wicker chair, so I do apologise. So maybe we should just head on in. What I'm wearing, well, first of all, I am wearing my adapted Salem sweater. This is a pattern by Dragon Horde Designs, also known as, well, her real name is Tristan Molina, I think, if I can remember it from memory. And this one is basically a knitted plain. I didn't do the cabling down the arms, but I did add some garter detailing on the raglan. And this is knit in my own hand dyed yarns from when I was a yarn dyer in the colourway Autumn Leaves on a Blueface Leicester nylon base. Also, we're going to have lighting coming on and off a little bit. It is one of those days where it's quite changeable. The clouds are moving quite rapidly, so we're getting nice bright sunshine through this window sometimes, and then other times it's completely overcast, so we'll just have to work with what we have. I have two finished objects, one almost finished object, and I have my Halu sweater that I showed on the last episode, which is well away, and I am also working on an older project as well. The two finished objects are just sock projects. If you've seen a previous video, I am doing a box of socks this year. So I have February's socks finished to show you, and I also have March socks in progress. But like, socks are not the only things on the list today. I even have spinning today, which I haven't had for such a long time. But we'll come to that once we get the knitting out of the way. So my first finished object was my first February socks, which were a lacework design pair of socks this time. I prefer to knit vanilla socks most of the time, but occasionally I branch out. This is the Romantical socks. I do have the pattern here. I think it's the Romantical socks. Yeah, the Romantical socks by the Unapologetic Knitter. I'm sure they're a different name on Ravelry actually. Megan Schmaltz, that's it. It is a free pattern on Ravelry. It's not a great picture, but that's okay because the socks are almost identical to the picture. They are just knit in a plain coloured yarn so that it really makes the lacework shine. I just inserted the lacework design into my typical vanilla sock pattern. So Turkish cast on, knit toe up, there is a gusset, I have a eye partridge on the heel turn, stockinette heel flap, and a 2x2 rib with stretchy bind off at the top. The lacework is just on the top of the sock and the front of the ankle. I didn't bother doing the back of the ankle as well. I did consider it, but decided just to do all of the front like the original design. I'm trying to turn it around on the sock blocker so you can see the heart design of the complete front of the sock. So this is the front of the sock now, and it has these two rows of heart lacework. I do like lacy socks. I don't particularly like knitting them, which is funny because I really enjoy knitting lace, but my sock knitting tends to be my relaxing knitting, kind of mindless. And when you're knitting lacework, obviously you're following a chart, and it kind of pulls away from that mindlessness. So I'm pulling out little bits of strands of mohair that I've got into these socks, because I have been knitting on my Halu sweater as well, and the fluff gets all over your clothes. So if you then pick up socks to work on, you're picking up the fibres off your clothes. So it's kind of, I'm going to have mohair in every single knitting project whilst I work with my Halu sweater. So this is the first pair. These are knit with a commercial sock yarn. I'm just trying to find the label. It is the Stylecraft Head Over Heels in the colourway Rudolph, and this was part of a set of 4 Christmas yarns that they brought out. I'm not sure if it was Christmas 22 or 21, but I did buy the set, and this was such a bright red. I did do toes and heels on one of the other colourways, but it is very much a, I don't know, that kind of 80s red, that it didn't really go with the other yarns in the set very well at all, because they were more of a richer, darker Christmas red. So I thought I would use up in a pair of plain red socks. I have very little of this left. I only have this much yarn. I can't even remember how much is there, but it's not a lot. It's under 10 grams, put it that way. I could probably do toes or a cuff for something else in the future. I'm holding up my other socks here because there is another pair of socks. I'm just grabbing things randomly out of my project bag. I did finish a second pair of socks in February. And I was on a bit of a sock knitting kick. I go through phases of not knitting much in the way of socks at all, maybe just a couple of rows whilst in the car, and that can be for months, and then I get a sock knitting, I don't know, just the urge to knit socks. I knit quite a few at the end of November, beginning of December, and I think I haven't really gotten past that. So instead of knitting one pair of socks in February, I knit a second, which is fine. It just means more socks at the end of the year. So these ones are just a pair of vanilla socks, and this is the one time I could do with the sun coming back out to really show the colours on these socks. Again, it's my toe up, Turkish cast on, toe up, gusset, eye partridge, stockinette, 2x2 rib. This is why they're a nice mindless knit for me, because I don't really have to think about it. I do pretty much the same vanilla socks all the time. The only exception is depending upon the yarn as to which size needles I knit on. So these are a commercial sock yarn. So these are knit on a 2.25mm 9-inch circular. I use a larger circular needle, a 2.25 magic loop for toes and the heels and the cuff, but the main parts of the sock are knit on a 9-inch circular. But I knit looser on 9-inch circular, so that's why when I come to use a indie dyed yarn, I tend to go down a needle size, otherwise it's too open. But it seems to work okay with commercial sock yarns because they're that bit woollier and that bit thicker than an indie dyed yarn. So those were knit on 2.25 9-inch circulars, but these ones were knit on a 2mm 9-inch circular. And now the sun's coming out, you can see the colours a bit better. This is a yarn I bought a while back from Felt Fusion, and the colourway is called Pink Chakra and Back, and it has these fabulous micro striping going on. And then I love, and not everybody likes this, but the colour pooling when you come to do the gusset on a sock with a variegated or a self-striping yarn, mostly with the variegated yarn, self-striping not so much, but with the variegated, I love the way the colour pools, and then it kind of shows off all the colours in the yarn, which you don't see so much in the micro striping, but you get a completely different effect, and I really like that. And no two socks tend to end up the same. So the other sock, the micro striping is a bit different, and the kind of the purples are showing it more, and then this kind of limey yellowy flame effect going on there. I just think it's fun, basically. So this yarn is a Blueface Leicester nylon base, I believe. Is it? Yes, it is a superwash Blueface Leicester nylon sock. I'm actually not sure on the percentage because it isn't wrought on, and the colourway is pink chakra and black, like I said, and the dye is a British dyer called Felt Fusion. I have a few of her yarns and a few that I've actually worked with as well, and she has some pretty cool colourways. I really am quite a fan of them. The contrast, I've used 2 undyed yarns for this. I have used an undyed commercial sock yarn for the toes and the heels. This one is the Regia undyed yarn, which I have all of here. I think I have about 60 grams of this left. But what I've started doing, instead of using it also for the contrast cuffs, when I have used it, I'm using up some merino bamboo undyed that I have. That is no good for toes and heels because it's not hardy enough. But I have no other current use for it, so I'm just using it up in the cuff, because in the cuff it doesn't matter about being hardy, and it's a little bit softer. Not that that's ever been a problem with socks for me, but it's just a way of using it up, really. I think I did 20 rounds on the cuff on these. Some socks I do 25. I think I did 20 on these. But if I do a shorter ankle, I usually do a 25 cuff. And I don't think there's anything more to say about these socks either. They are really bonny. They remind me of the 80s. I know I'm dropping things everywhere. I know people think of the 80s as neon, but in reality, the 80s wasn't really neon. I mean, there was neon-y things. You think about arcades and things like that, and 80s leotards, neon, fair enough. But when you were a kid in the 80s was primary coloured clothing and toys and stuff. And this is what this reminds me of. It reminds me of what was considered rainbow colours back in the 80s. This is 80s rainbow. So I'm really happy with these 2, and these are 2 more pairs of socks to add to my box of socks for this year. I'm hoping to knit at least one pair per month through the year. So far I've done well. I did 1 pair in January, and 2 pairs in February. I did actually start a 3rd pair in February because I just needed something mindless. I was doing complicated bits on other projects, and I wanted something I could just work on that evening. So I did start a 3rd pair for March, but I haven't quite finished them yet. They're mostly done though. In fact, I have 1 completed sock that I can put on the blockers. The second one is not complete yet, but I will show you the finished one. Because the second one is so far along, I don't know if I'll be showing them again on the podcast. So this is my March socks. If the camera will focus for me. There we go. It's getting there. Okay, so these are, again, just a vanilla pair of socks, and I've done contrast toes, heels, cuffs, Turkish, as usual, Turkish cast on, toe up, eye partridge on the heel turn, stockinette on the heel, and a 2x2 rib. This is some yarn that I bought from the Edinburgh Yarn Festival way back in either 2017 or 2018. It was the last one that there was, I think it was the last Edinburgh Yarn Festival, and they were specifically bought for socks. The yarns are by the Knitting Goddess. I bought 3 cakes of yarn from her, and they were all designed to go together. So the second sock is mostly done. I have about an inch more to knit on the ankle and then just the cuff, and then these will be finished as well. I might even get these finished tonight, depending on how much knitting I get done. The main body of the socks are in this lovely variegated yarn that is a Superwash Blueface Leicester nylon blend. This is in the colourway Flower Power, and the contrast is in a base I have not used before, and it is a, I think it's Blueface Leicester. Yeah, it is 75% Superwash Blueface Leicester, 25% mohair. So it's one of those alternative sock yarns, if it will focus. There we go. It has a really nice low level sheen to it, which I really like. And it is in this gorgeous variegated green. It's got kind of a mid leafy green and then a nice bluey green as well. This is in the colourway green. That is all it is called. Her logo is there, the Knitting Goddess. And yeah, I also got a third skein in the same BFL mohair base in the colourway Ruby, which is kind of like a, it's somewhere between a dark cerise pink and a red, but on the duskier side. And the idea being that the three kind of work well together. So I should have enough of this left over to knit another pair of socks with the pinky red as the contrast toes and heels. I'm not sure how well this will hold up on the heel. The toe shouldn't really be a problem. The only time I've ever worn out toes on my socks was when I made the big mistake of using merino bamboo as a contrast for toes and heels. Those socks have been repaired numerous times. In fact, I'm going to re-knit the toes on those. Just to cut them off and re-knit the toes. So I don't usually wear out my toes, but I do wear out the heels, or the bottom of the heel, which is why I do the slip stitches there. I don't bother on the back because I'm at home most of the time. They don't get worn out in shoes because I'm just wearing slippers on my socks, and they have like open backs. But even when I've worn slippers at a full back, they haven't worn socks out, but they do wear out on the ball of the foot, and they do wear on the ball of the heel, and they do wear out on the ball of the foot, which is not a problem for the Blueface Leicester on those, but I'm not sure how well the heels will hold up. But I will still knit the other pair with the pink. I may even do them as a secondary pair in March if I fancy doing another pair of socks. And then dependent on how well they hold up as to whether I do my original plan, which was to knit a pair of completely green mohair socks and a pair of completely pink mohair socks. Otherwise these might get used in something else at some point down the line. I am knitting these on a 2mm 9-inch circular as well because they are a indie dyed yarn. Indie dyed yarns tend to be on the lighter side of a fingering weight yarn, and I find on a 2.25 the gauge is just that little bit loose for my liking. So that's what I'm doing with these. So that is all the socks, thank goodness, for this episode. In fact, I'm going to zip that up because I knew I would drop it and everything would come falling out. So what have we got apart from socks? Well, I am working on my Halu sweater. I showed this on the last episode. It is a design by Caitlin Hunter, and it is a two-strands held double, which is the front. This is the front. So it is really coming along now. The body is mostly completed. I have knit to minimum length and then paused to knit the sleeves, which is my preferred method of doing sweaters. That way I'm not going to run out of yarn halfway down sleeve number 2. I have knit, I don't know, 6 inches maybe of the first sleeve, but I did get to the point last night where I want to do some decreases. This sweater, well, let's talk about the yoke first. The yoke is gorgeous. It is a lace work yoke with bobbles, and the way that Caitlin does these bobbles and just the tutorial for them, they are really easy. There's none of that knit 4 stitches into 1 stitch, turn your work, knit them back, turn your, oh, there's none of that faffing around. It's something like knit front back 4 times, 5 times, or whatever it is, and then you're passing those same stitches back on the first needle and then knitting them again. So you're never having to turn your work, you're just re-knitting the stitches. It's so much easier. I used to hate doing bobbles, but I think I'm probably going to use this technique every time I knit bobbles now in future. I think the tutorial is on her YouTube channel as well for the bobbles, so even if you're not knitting the sweater, the tutorial is there to be able to watch. The yarn is actually more of my old hand-dyed yarn. It is in the colourway, actually I'm going to have to check, I think it's Carnations, but I need to see it in the cake, bear with me. I have 6 balls of yarn on the go at the same time in here, and I have 2 in a Ziploc bag, because I'm holding merino nylon double with mohair, silk mohair, and I am getting quite low. I'm gonna have to weigh how much I have left. Yes, so the colourway is Carnations on the merino, which is this lovely speckled yarn in like a white, creamy white with pinks and golds and burgundies, and I'm holding double with silk mohair in the colourway Hounds of Love, which was a limited edition colourway for the Scottish Yarn Festival collaboration club, no, jukebox club, anyway, it's a club colourway, and it's working out really, really nice. But because I'm working with 3 skeins of my hand-dyed yarn of the merino, I am alternating skeins, so, but I'm alternating all 3 held double, so I'm alternating 6. Well, I'm not alternating 6, but I'm alternating 3 held double, so I'm keeping them as organised as possible, and that seems to work quite well actually. I just kind of half zip up the Ziploc bags, so there's a 3-inch gap in each bag, and they don't get too tangled actually. They just need a little bit of untwisting because I haven't untwisted them from last night's knitting. The V-neck on this, well, first of all I'll show you the pattern, which to be honest, now I've knit most of the sweater, is kind of pointless because it is printed in black and white. The yoke, or rather the collar, is this unusual V-neck ribbed collar with some detailing on the shoulder section. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to show that. There we go. Which kind of gives it an almost a contiguous method kind of look to it, or not a saddle shoulder, but the contiguous method of constructing top-down garment has this kind of section at the top where the stitches go kind of straight down the shoulder for a while, and it kind of gives that effect. I really like that bit of detailing on the shoulder. When I looked at other people's projects for this on Ravelry, there was a lot of very open shoulders, almost like 80s off the shoulder effect, and I didn't want that. So what I did was I actually knit the collar 1 size smaller than the body. So, and in fact there is 1 more row of stockinette after the cast on before the rib, which gives more of a rolled neck, and I took out 1 row of that because I didn't want it to roll too much. So it gives a much, in my opinion, a much neater finish on here than the original design. So I did one size smaller, and then I had pretty much finished knitting the body before it dawned on me that I hadn't changed needle sizes after knitting the rib. So this should have actually been a slightly looser gauge than it currently is, but it's fine because the gauge is still really nice on it. The fabric is working up delightfully, and I'm loving the speckles, which now the sun's gone in, you can't see, but when the sun comes out you'll see it again. There's lots of gold speckles in amongst the pinks and burgundies, which I love. The sleeves on this are knit straight down with no decreases, and then there is a section of lace work on the sleeve. Oh, sorry about that, and more hair's making me sneeze. There is lace work just before the cuff of the sleeve, but when I've looked at people's projects, it's very balloon-like, and the lace work tends to be looser gauge. Hello, looser gauge than the sleeve, so it kind of has this little poof effect, and I'm not keen. So what I'm thinking of doing is, instead of the sleeve being completely balloon-like, is I've knit so far down. I think I've knit to probably just past the elbow. I haven't tried it on since last night, but I want to get past the chunkiest part of my arm, and then I'm going to put a few decreases in and probably reduce down to the size below or one below that stitch count for the sleeve, so that it's just not quite so bulbous. The other option would be to reduce down a little bit and then reduce down again just before the rib, which might be a better call. I might do that, so reduce down one size down to the rib section, and then reduce down one size more, then knit the lace section. I think that's what I will do. I also need to weigh how much yarn, because now that I've seen how much is in there, I'm a little concerned. The speckles are showing a little bit better now, but there are some nice gold speckles in there, and I really love it. I can't wait for this to be finished. It's so pretty. I do like knitting lace yokes. I've knit 2 Swags by Caitlin Hunter because I just love the lace work so much. So this is my kind of ongoing main project. It was put to one side for a little bit, just while I was finishing up some plying on my spin, which again I will talk about in a minute. The other project, I'm kind of nibbling it away at it because I'm not really enjoying it, to be honest, but I want it done. It's kind of like I just want the project, I'm not enjoying the process. It is a shawl that I'm working on, and I forgot I am mid-roll. Why would I do this to myself? Okay, so this is the Phobia shawl by Lily Skog, formerly Nordic Stitches. I have knit about a foot of depth on this triangular shawl, and I'm adding extra increases at the ends to make it more of a semi-triangle, semi-boomerang shawl. Boomerang shawl? No, boomerang shawls are different. So it's an extended triangle basically, because I'm a little concerned about having enough wingspan with the amount of yarn that I have. So I'd rather get it wider and a shallower shawl than it be a deep triangle and not be able to wrap it around my neck basically. So it's coming on, it looks really nice. I love the 2 tones of the charcoal and how they're working up together. Currently it's just bands of stockinette and garter. It's the stockinette sections I'm not enjoying. It's fingering weight yarn, and I'm having to knit row and purl a row, and I do not like purling fingering weight yarn. I can cope if I'm knitting Aran weight, I'll just suffer it because it doesn't take that long to knit a row. But knitting a row in fingering weight, purling a row in fingering weight, I just find it very slow and frustrating, and it makes my shoulders hurt. That's the biggest problem with purling for me. I have the same problem when I'm knitting rib. I get a lot of tension in the muscles here on the front of my shoulder, and they cramp up really, really badly and very painfully. So it's the main reason I don't like purling. I was never keen on purling anyway, because I'm so much slower. I have to purl English style, but when I'm knitting I can knit continental. But because the way I hold the yarn when I'm knitting continental, I can't purl continental. I can purl Norwegian style, but it is a bit slower. Maybe I should just do that. I mean, even if it is slower, but it does use your wrist a lot more. We'll see how we go. I have a few parts on this where the tension is very poor, and I don't know whether I've just accidentally slipped a stitch and it's just looking a bit strange, but I'll be glad when this project is done. Do I have the pattern? I do. So the pattern is a fairly simple shawl. It has lots of garter and stockinette, and then there are lacy sections, eyelet lacy sections, and there is these sections which I think are like a moss stitch, semi-moss stitch design. But honestly, I just really want a black or almost black shawl, because that's kind of what goes, like, often when what I'm wearing, I need a neutral shawl basically. So the yarns were bought at the Scottish Yarn Festival in Perth, and I have two slightly lighter and one slightly darker charcoal colour in this gorgeous shimmery shiny base, and it is a 50% alpaca, 50% alpaca, 50% rose fibre by the Border Mill. But I'm not entirely sure if they are still making this base, because when I looked on the website they only had a couple of colours, so I'm not sure. I did see this originally at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival that I'd gone to the previous year, and then they had these at Perth. So whether they've just changed their bases since then, I'm not sure. But it is really nice yarn. It's gorgeously soft. It's super soft and very shiny, but I'm just not really enjoying the process. I'm knitting these on a 3.5mm needle as well, and I just keep nibbling at it. So yesterday I got my 5 rows done whilst watching TV in the afternoon, watching some YouTube, but I was just kind of slogging through it before I thought I'd just had enough now and went and did something else. So that is all the knitting content, and I have a little bit of spinning content this episode. You may have seen this kind of partly spun up on the wheel from previous, like, Vlogmas's probably, and autumn knitting plan videos. So I bought 2 braids of fibre created by LCB, who is an American dyer of fibre, and I love her fibre. I bought 2 colours. I bought Pumpkin Ale, which is 100% Rambouillet in one of her repeatable colourways, and there is her logo. And I also bought Spiced Pumpkin in the same base. So the Pumpkin Ale, I've got to try and remember these the right way around now. So the Pumpkin Ale was a semi-solid orange, and the Spiced Pumpkin was a multicoloured braid, kind of browns and oranges. And I will put a photo up on the screen here which shows both fibres plied up onto 2 different bobbins, because the idea was to spin them both up, one on each bobbin, and then ply them together. What I didn't take into account was I spun up the multicoloured one about 2 years ago, at least 2 years ago, and when I went to spin the orange, I ended up spinning it finer than the original bobbin, because I was going for a fingering weight yarn. So I knew I had to spin fine, and I did spin fine. I spun the orange very fine. So the finished yarn, which I have here, which is, can I just say, absolutely gorgeous. It looks so nice. Is definitely on the lighter side of fingering weight. Isn't really too much of a problem because it is destined to be a shawl, so I can just adjust my gauge to how it looks nice. But to be honest, most shawls are knit on a fairly loose gauge anyway. Originally I was going to knit the cobblestone shawl. I don't remember the designer for that, I'm afraid. I will try and find out, put it on the screen. But I might knit myself a dotted rays shawl by Stephen West. I did knit one of these for Mum a couple of years ago, and I intended to knit one for myself in a different fibre that I haven't spun yet, but I might use this instead, because when I plied it up I realised I'd done fairly long stretches of colour of the multicoloured yarn rather than short lengths. The cobblestone really looks nice done in a variegated one, because every set of stitches, which makes kind of like a little square, kind of makes the colours pop compared to the next row. It just looks really interesting and hand spun. I'd seen somebody's project and it looked really good. But because these are longer colour repeats, I might do the dotted rays to kind of show the bands of colour instead. But because I had knit because I had spun the orange fibre so fine, I had a lot more yardage left of the orange than I did once I'd plied them up. So I also have a small skein of this. In fact, I have 60 grams out of a 4-ounce braid. So we're talking, I only used around 50 grams to ply against 113 grams worth of the multicoloured one. So I spun the orange one half the thickness, not near enough, which is a bit annoying because it took nearly a fortnight to make this yarn. Well, to make the second braid, the orange, and ply it up took me a good couple of weeks, and it would have been less if I had spun the orange to the same diameter of the original one. This is what happens when you don't check against a yarn gauge how thick your ply is, which I've got no excuse for because I have one printed out and I could have checked and kept an eye on what my wraps per inch were, and I didn't. So I also have an orange. 60 grams worth of orange, and I wound this off this morning and it is very fine. It is pretty much lace weight. Not sure if this will show very well, but it is fine. It is lace weight. I could knit this. I could knit something lace weight with this. So what I might do, if I do the dotted rays, I will use the orange, the semi-solid orange, to do the I-cord bind off. So it'll go together, but it'll kind of be nice and solid edge on it. And then whatever's left over, it'll get used up in something. I can always hold it double and work it up as a fingering weight, or I can put it in some colour work. Might even use it for colour work. This would actually work okay with this kind of standard Shetland spindrift because it's on the finer side, and because this is hand spun, it tends to be a little bit fluffier than a commercial spun yarn. So that is my spinning as well, and I think that's everything that I've been working on. I really want to do some sewing. I mean to do sewing all the time and I never seem to get around to it. I have so much fabric earmarked for certain projects. I really need to get on top of that. But I also, kind of knitting is my go-to. I kind of think of knitting and spinning to a certain degree as not so much creative hobbies, although they are. I don't do them to kind of make something creative. I do them to keep my hands busy. I like having the object at the end of the day, but the actual process of knitting isn't really my way of using my creative mind, as it were. And I feel like I need to do something creative that isn't just kind of mindless, because knitting is mindless. I do knitting whilst watching TV mostly. It's the same with spinning. It's something I do to keep my hands busy whilst watching TV. And I feel like I need to figure out something I can do that doesn't involve watching telly at the same time. It's kind of, you're fully focused on creating something. Maybe I'll pick up my paints again. I'm not sure. Okay, I think, what else is there? Any life update stuff? Yes, good, some nice and some not so nice. We've been working on this room and just freshening it up a bit. When we first moved to Orkney, we did this room first, and it was just a building site. But certain things needed changing. We did a few minor changes and just some repainting and stuff. We put underlay under the carpet, which it didn't have, and repainted the woodwork. And I can't think what else. We put new windowsills in and things like that, more insulation and stuff. So we're just kind of starting to work through some of the rooms of the house, especially ones that have kind of already been done. But then after you've lived here for a while, you realise, oh, we should have done this, or should have done that, or we could make things better by doing this or that. So today we start work on one of the attic rooms, and that's going to be a bit more of a construction job than a decorating job. So there is that. We had a family member pass away, so there was that, and I'm just making plans at the moment for my son's visits in the summer. One's wanting to come up for quite an extended stay, my youngest, and my oldest is wanting to bring up his girlfriend to introduce to me. And yeah, so there's those to organise, like kind of timings and stuff like that. And I don't know what else to talk about. People, what are they watching, reading, listening? Well, first of all, I haven't read anything for months. Watching, we are picking back up the Vikings series. We had got halfway through season 3 when we were originally watching them, which was a few years ago now. So we've been watching some of that. We're halfway through season 4 now. And I just watched Damsel. We watched Damsel on Netflix last night. I rather enjoyed it, but I enjoy anything that Millie Bobby Brown is in, and I liked it. John thought it was okay. I enjoyed it, so I'm gonna have to rewatch that again when Mum's here, perhaps. So yeah, I don't know. What would people like to know? We have our seed potatoes, so they need chitting, ready to go in the garden. Our tomato plants are looking a little bit weedy. Yeah, they're looking a bit, and several of them haven't grown, and our cucumber seeds haven't germinated. So there might not be so much in the greenhouse this year. But other than that, not a lot is happening around here. It's pretty much the same. Yeah, so I'm not going to make this too much longer, I think. I think it's probably as long as I want it now. I don't like my videos to get too long. It's kind of like when I go to watch something on YouTube and say I have a cup of tea and I want to watch something and do a bit of knitting and have a relax and a rest, and I'll put YouTube on, and I prefer podcasts that are sort of like the half-hour mark up to 40 minutes. Once you get beyond that, you've got to plan to watch them. So I like to keep mine within the 40-minute mark if I possibly can, and I think that's pretty much coming up to where it is now. So I think I'm going to leave it here for this episode. Hopefully next time it'll be shorter, because I won't be leaving it for 4-6 weeks or whatever it is that since I last recorded. And yeah, so I shall hopefully see you on the next episode, and thank you for watching. Bye bye.